Okay. Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Jonah, and he's been a guest before, talking about his near-death experience. I'll put the link in the description. But today, I think it's been 3 years, Jonah, since you were
Mhm.
on.
Yep. Yep.
We've been catching up for like a half hour now, but I'm going to have him start where he likes and take as long as he likes. Okay, Jonah?
All right. All right. Thank you so much, Peggy. And while I thought I'd recap some of the NDE because I think it colors what comes next here, which is sort of the whole point. And yes, we did have this detailed conversation about it, and links to that below, I'm sure. But the quick version of the NDE is simply this. This was a post-surgical situation. I was not in the hospital any longer. I had been let out. I was in the care of my father. I was 29 years old. And as a result of complications from that surgery, there was a moment in which it was intimately clear. There was actually an inner click. It's the best way I could describe it. That there was simply this vibrant inner click. And in this moment, it was instantly clear that the life force in my body was beginning to drain away. The body was beginning to shut down and beginning to die. And there were three things that arose simultaneously in that moment. The first was a clear awareness that I wasn't my body. And that manifested in a way of being what's often known in a lot of spiritual circles as observer mode, where I was instantly aware that there was a part of my awareness, part of my consciousness that could see that my body was dying and was experiencing it. And yet it was also clear that that observer was not dying. There was the body and the observer were two different things. One of them was dying, one of them was absolutely unchanged in any way at all. And there's an enormous implication of freedom in that, but it was even more than usual. And this is something I go into in much more detail in our prior interview. But the reason it was greater than usual is that the surgery I had just gone through was well known to be something that is extremely painful to recover from. And that had proven very, very true. And so in the moment of seeing that I wasn't the body was a moment of complete freedom from the suffering in that body. And so there was a moment in which it's not as though that pain had disappeared. It didn't. It's that the identification with it changed so that I wasn't suffering it at all. It was a complete release from the suffering.
Like taking off a pair of shoes that have been hurting your feet all day.
Well, kind of. It's yeah, that's as good an analogy as any, really. But the we could go into it more, but again, that's what the prior interview is for. But that's not the only thing that happened in that moment. The second thing that clicked in immediately was a simple awareness that this was a process that was going kind of slowly and it was going to take a while. And it's one of the things that I've, since learned made my own experience in this NDE world something that's a little bit unusual, which is that I got to see what it was like to be dying for a long time. I didn't know it in this exact moment that occurred, but it was clear that that life force was draining away and it was draining away at a relatively slow rate. It was literally like watching the mercury recede in a thermometer, and it was going to take a while until it really got to the bottom. I didn't know if I had a few days or more than that or less than that. But it was going to be a little while. And that was powerful in that moment simply because with that recognition was the odd experience that there was not the slightest bit of panic in it. There was nothing in me that said, oh, I've got to do something about this. Time is short. In fact, it was the absolute opposite. It was something in me went, oh my God, the freedom here is extraordinary. This is, I'm going to have a while to revel in this. rather than being in a panic to fix it, the experience was, oh my goodness, what an extraordinary gift to realize that I'm going to be able to revel in this for some time. What an extraordinary gift.
Isn't that strange that sometimes it's that way? Like, oh, okay. Like acceptance. And other times it's like, no way. I'm too young or whatever it is.
Well, I think it's tied very much to what I mentioned just before, which was there's such an extraordinary freedom in it that wasn't there before. And that was an extraordinary gift. It's one of those things that is difficult to put into words, that kind of freedom. But if you've been in blackout, mind-bending levels of pain for days, and then that suffering is lifted completely, it's a place you kind of want to stay.
Mhm.
It's not some, the idea, the other thing about it was that in that, in that, in that first recognition in which I realized I'm not the body, there's also this recognition that that observer aspect of consciousness was unchanged and completely at peace. That there's nothing that could happen to that body, not even horrendous pain or even its death, that could really disturb the peace in that
Where were you
observer.
in your life at that time? Were you married, kids?
No, I wasn't married. I was 29 years old. I was a single dude in a relationship with a lovely woman at the time. And I mean, the actual setting was I had gone from 4 days in the hospital. They had sort of booted me out in a way that is, in retrospect, is was medically absurd. Like sometimes that's healthcare in America these days. It's
Yeah.
great. Sometimes it doesn't. But um, I was released from the hospital in a state of healing that just was nowhere near actually ready to go home.
Mhm.
And my father was there. He
I
had
want to say something real quick for anybody listening
yeah.
that ever gets in that situation. Tell them you're not going home. I have been in situations where I have said, I am not going home. You're sending me home. I'm telling you, something's there definitely wrong here.
Yeah.
I'm not going home. I mean, they have to keep you.
I don't know how it works very well. I hope that works because I know what you mean, Peggy.
It worked with my
It's
twins, ectopic pregnancy.
good. Uh, I know so what had been done to me, just to paint the picture, was I'd had a pretty massive surgery on my throat. They'd removed a great deal of tissue from my throat. They'd removed a few chips of bone from the skull behind my nose. And it was actually to solve a sleep apnea issue that was pretty severe. And it was a sleep apnea issue that was actually just sort of a genetic quirk in my case, and that by removing all this tissue, they would open up these passages, make them bigger, and solve the apnea problem, which they did. But it's an extremely nerve-rich part of your body that you have to continue to use. You have to continue to breathe and to swallow and things like this. So the one of the doctors ahead of time said, listen, this is the recovery is going to be rough, and you're going to have to deal with the kind of pain where you've broken your leg and you have to walk on it for days. And that sounded over dramatic at the time, but it was absolutely accurate. It was horrendous in that way. And because it also had to do with my throat, by the time 4 days after the surgery, when they send me away from the hospital, I'm really incapable of even speaking. I could barely eke out a whispered word. Like my own ability to advocate for myself was essentially zero. I don't know what, I don't have any idea why the decisions were made at the time in the way they were made. I really wasn't party to them. I just knew I was being sent away from the hospital, and I was grateful that at 29 years old, my father was still inclined to be looking over me and invited me to the family farmhouse to watch over me basically in my recovery. It's, I didn't have a perfect relationship with my father, but he was a good man, and it's something that I will always remember him for, with as an act of great love on his part. And so what I'm describing to you is in terms of the NDE experience is actually happening in my parents' home out in the country, 2 hours outside of the city of Seattle, on 90 acres of farmland in the middle of the summer. And the uh, in that instant in which I realize that I am in fact dying, my body's beginning to shut down, and I'm describing, first that I'm not my body, secondly that it's going to be a little while. There's such freedom in that and such extraordinariness in it that it didn't come across as a tragedy. One of the reasons it didn't come across as a tragedy is again because there was this initial freedom in which it was so clear that the body and this aware consciousness were two different things. That aware consciousness clearly was not dying. And it was clearly then the deepest essence of who I was. It was very clear in that moment that the body wasn't me. That wasn't where the seat of that identity was. It was in that that awareness. And if that awareness wasn't dying, then I wasn't really dying. The body was dying. And so that's part of the reason that there was no sense of tragedy in it. There was no sense of panic in it. There was no sense that, oh, there's a problem here. In fact, it's the opposite. I'm in the middle of experiencing something that is that nothing worldly or bodily can adversely impact. There's nothing in the world that can hurt that aware consciousness. Nothing. If the most horrendous pain possible and the death of the body can't do it, then nothing else in this world can either. It just can't. It can't impugn that peace. And that's why it was something to be reveling in. And yes, that came as a revelation and a shock and mind blowing, which is also why I knew that I couldn't possibly explain it to my father. And so when he came in the room, there wasn't the slightest impulse in any way to say, "Oh, Dad, hey, I'm I'm dying." I knew that I couldn't possibly explain that myself and my body were two different things. But I also knew I couldn't explain to him how I understood how this felt, that 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 freedom was inexpressible in a way I just didn't have the words at all.
I think we just pause here for a second and just stop and think that knowing that we often get just before we pass.
Yeah.
Where does that intelligence come from? That knowing, it's just a question we can't answer, but I've had it and I know others. And before you pass, it's like, oh, I'm dying.
hmm
And
Well,
it's like getting a phone call, somebody informing you, but you're not hearing that voice. It's just that it's knowing.
yeah. Well, I think you're speaking to the heart of what I'm speaking to as well. Like it's one of the reasons that I love this subject that we're talking about today is that it's something that every single one of us is going to meet eventually in some way or another. And that means that there's an opportunity for every single one of us at some point along the way to run into these same truths. And when you, however it happens, however it comes, whenever it happens, under whatever circumstances, when that comes in such a way that there's a part of your own experience that shows you something so much bigger than you probably realized throughout most of the rest of your life, that you can't deny.
Does
I
it,
mean,
then the
it's
question
one of the
comes,
great gifts. It's
yeah,
one of the great gifts that's coming for every one of us.
yeah, the question comes, who's controlling this now?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can answer that one in a way that has a satisfactory universal
I mean,
answer.
for
Uh,
you personally, have you thought about that? Who's
oh, I
controlling,
do.
who's
Yeah, I
controlling
do.
it now?
I
Something
do.
just
And
took away my pain. I'm in another thing. I'm not in my body. Is someone controlling this? Where's this knowing come from?
let me attempt to answer that
Okay.
with the third thing that happened
Okay.
at the same time as these others. So the first is I realized I wasn't my body. The second is I know it's going to take a little while, but there was a third aspect of that floods in, and it's that, and I have to refer again to the first one of them because in that awareness that I'm not my body, there is a sense that I'm still me. Like there's an individuated sense of me, an I-ness.
Right?
It's just that it's recognized as being non-corporeal. It's not, my body is not, it's not a required part of it. I can be this, sort of a non-corporeal sense of I. And it's easy to associate that in popular language with something like a soul. But what I'm about to describe breaks that down a little bit, which was that in the third sort of recognition, that individuated but non-corporeal sense of I began to lose its individuality. It began to dissipate. It began to fall away and lose any sense of individuality at all. And it was losing its individuatedness in favor of this sort of all encompassing and all comprehensive allness. This is very difficult to put into words, but I'm going to try. So that small sense of I was dissolving into what felt like absolutely all, absolutely everything. And what I would stress about that is that it sounds like that's what death really is sometimes. Like if I'm not here, then I'm dead. That's what death is in most people's minds in the most sort of ordinary way. But this was dissolving into allness. And what I must say about allness is that it contains everything. And if it contains absolutely everything, then there cannot possibly be a sense of loss at all.
Isn't that lost though? That feeling of dissipating
No,
into, you're saying
no.
allness, but I would picture it as nothingness. So
Well, I mean, the best answer is come and find out. Come and see for yourself.
I don't want to. That sounds
Um,
scary to me.
but again,
To me,
so
it's like
let me.
salt going into soup. It's no longer salt because it's went into the soup and now it's all up in the soup. You know what I mean?
uh
And it's like it's no longer salt, but it's all mixed
I
in.
I can appreciate the analogy, but the salt is still in there, and in that allness, there is awareness that there is salt
But the
because
salt don't have identity
Peggy,
as being salt anymore. It's no longer special. It's
it,
salt.
it
It's
it doesn't have an individuated identity, but it because it's absolutely all and all encompassing. It literally encompasses all. There's nothing that it can't conceive. There's nothing that it can't be aware of. There's nothing. It's sort of like, let me put it this way. From the sort of, from the sort of generally ordinary perspective of things, it's often like feeling like we're a tiny little point in the universe looking up at the vastness of it all. And it doesn't take too much to squish out that little individuatedness.
I'll tell you why it scares me. When I was writing my memoir, I was sitting there writing, I'm going by my memories, and all of a sudden I sat back and I was writing about my drowning. I
Mhm.
felt like I was dissipating. I was remembering the drowning
Yes.
and feeling so well, but all of a sudden I felt like I was
Mhm.
dissipating. That word just
Yeah.
stuck with me, dissipate. And
Yep.
I like had to grab like on the reality. It's like I didn't like that feeling. It's like free falling, not falling,
Hmm.
but dissipating.
Yeah,
Dissipating. And
it's a good word
I
for it.
don't like that. And I hear the IANS people say a lot, we're all one. I hate it.
Right.
I hate it. They're all like, you got to have this slogan to be with the IANS people. We're all one. Like, I hate that. And they're like, don't you know that Indians feel we're all one? It's like, no, I don't. I don't want to be not me. You know what I mean? And my identity. I don't want
Yes,
to be a part of everybody else.
I do know. I do. In fact, I recorded a video very recently um, describing that same thing because at 17 years old, I had I've gone through a lot of experiences. This NDE is not the first, nor was it the last. This NDE was a very powerful signpost in my own journey, but it was not the solely and only major turning point by any stretch. And I remember vividly, I tell it in the video I'm referring to, of being 17 and feeling that sense of identity dropping away and finding it terrifying. And in fact, running in the opposite direction of that because it was terrifying. Like I don't ever want to see, touch, feel, experience. I don't want to come close to that thing, that experience ever again. Uh, 12 years later, I have an NDE and I'm faced directly with it again. But it's in a different context. It's in a different way and with a kind of different ground under my feet. I'm watching the dissolution of my own body. I realize that I'm not the body, first of all, and that takes it takes some of the pressure off. Like, oh, I was so concerned about this. Oh, you know what? It turns out, and it's a strange thing to say out loud and live. Turns out that this isn't actually that important. I mean, in fact, it could be in horrible pain or even die. And this aware consciousness is not just fine, it's extraordinary.
But I think if you dissipate and you're like all one with some, like you no longer, that's when you no longer exist. That is to me, a death.
Well, that's the funny conundrum of allness. Because let me finish what I was
Okay.
starting to say a little bit earlier, which is like the the usual sort of point of view that we hold, as humans that we kind of walk around with is that we're a tiny little point. This is us. This is me. I occupy this little space, and I'm looking up at this absolutely vast universe. And it's a pretty harsh universe. It can squish me right out of existence really quite easily. In the dissolution of that, there was no sense of loss in any way whatsoever. In fact, what it does is it flipped that perspective upside down so that it was the absolute allness containing all. And because it contains all, it was also capable of and fully embracing of the awareness of that one. It's like it could look from that vastness down onto that tiny little point and go, oh, you're fine. You're part of this too. And so there was no sense of loss of that individuatedness. It's just that it was rendered uh, a part of that absolute wholeness. And the identity was not in that small point, it was with that vastness in a way that can still include that tiny point because, again, it is all encompassing.
It feels to me like it's me against the world. And
Yes.
you're talking about that. And I feel like the world just gobbled me up.
The world just gobbled you up.
Yeah.
The world just gobbled you up.
Yeah. If you're no longer
Hmm.
you dissipated into this oneness. I feel like that's the world gobbling you up. Like, this ate you alive. Like, yeah, we survive our
Hmm.
body and we're still here. But then if
Hmm.
it continues, are we gobbled up by, I use the word gobbled up, dissipating in words that aren't
Hmm.
attractive, where you're kind of like embellishing in this space. And so
Well,
difference.
yeah. Yeah, I mean the I know from my own experience as a human, just like you do, that we spend most of our time on this earth, on this plane, very concerned about our own existence.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a funny thing to say out loud.
Well, we have to.
Um,
It's like ingrained. Babies even know they're about to fall. Puppies
right,
and
yes, of
cats know,
course.
they know. They don't
Yeah,
want to fall. They don't want too close to an
yeah,
edge.
yeah. And let's be very clear that even though I feel deeply, deeply infused by everything I'm describing here today, which is which is which first of all, and this is what perhaps we'll have enough time to get to this, but in the years subsequent to this NDE, to this experience, there were a whole bunch of other additional experiences that came that required me to revisit all of this over and over and over and over. So there's a whole bunch of other transformative experiences that were coming my way. And it's it's because of those additional experiences more than anything else, even more than the original NDE itself, that this stuff began to be feel like it was really ingrained, embodied, and that there was in fact a particular point of, we often call it awakening these days. There was a real, genuinely dramatic shift in perception on my part. It took place a solid uh, 11 years after the NDE, in which what I'm trying to describe here that was touched in that NDE really became solid somehow within. Like there was something that cracked and fell away, and it's always been, you know, it's been different ever since.
But you didn't
And
experience voices. You didn't see people. You didn't learn something. You weren't told something. You had this awareness. Is that correct?
um, that's a little bit true, and there's a little bit more to the story.
Okay.
Um, in terms of the sort of classic scenario of, hey, there was a tunnel of light, I saw all my favorite dead people, and that sort of thing, that did not happen. And I learned from a dear friend recently that studies such things in depth and with uh, the scientific method, that particular experience is pretty common, but it happens to about 15% of people that go through a near-death experience of some sort.
That see a dead relative or
Yeah,
just,
tunnel of light with favorite dead people at the end of it. So it's pretty common, but it's not everybody. And it's true that it was different in my case because in that overwhelming sense of allness, again, there was no sense of anything missing. And so there was no sense of, it's funny to put it this way, there was no sense of not seeing those things. There was no, I didn't miss it. I felt so utterly enveloped in an all-encompassing peace. And there's at the core of that peace, the only way for it to be that peaceful is for it to be ultimately overarchingly loving. So the core experience of encountering great love was absolutely at the core of my own experience. It just wasn't embodied in the same form as seeing dead relatives. But that underlying content, that underlying experience of feeling utterly enveloped in that tremendous love was absolutely part of it. It's also why when my father would come into the room while I'm going through this, there was again no impulse whatsoever to say, "Hey, I'm dying." There was also no impulse to speak because there was the sense that there was nothing wrong, that nothing needed to be changed, that everything was great the way it was, that in that all-encompassing wholeness, nothing could possibly be missing. And if there's nothing missing, there can't be any sense of there being something wrong. And there wasn't.
I
there can't
wonder.
be any sense, if there can't possibly be the sense of something being wrong or amiss, there can't possibly be any, or lack. There was no sense of lack or want or need, because that's what allness embodies. And so there couldn't possibly be any sense of fear. There wasn't. And many of us have heard many, many times in many different ways that what's the opposite of fear? It's love. What's the opposite of love? Fear. Well, if there is no fear, then the sort of natural default setting is something loving. So when my father came into the room, all that I felt inclined to do was smile at him to the best of my ability at the time and just feel tremendously loving towards him. And that's all.
So you
I
weren't
said nothing.
dead.
I was not dead. I was dying. My body was shutting down. You're right. I was not dead.
So I wonder if
Mhm.
the dying process before
Mhm.
death is this disassociation where the pain stops. We got this calm. It's like the body produces a morphine. Maybe I'm just throwing out guesses to
I
where
don't really
it
know
gives the
medically.
body a relief, because that's where we get that knowing, oh, I'm dying. We clearly know something, just the pain just stopped. Whatever's going on physically just stopped.
Let me be clear about that though, because that's not actually the way I would say it.
Okay.
Because I can tell you that the pain in the body did not stop. I
Oh,
want to be real clear about that.
you were clearly
The,
in the
the,
body still.
the pain in the body was as present as ever. It was a failing, messed up, pain-ridden, racked, racked with pain, but that pain wasn't a problem. I wasn't suffering the pain because I wasn't the body. I wasn't associating myself to the pain. It's the first time, what I'm describing is discovering that there was a difference between pain and suffering. There was pain in that body. I just wasn't suffering it at all because I wasn't the body, clearly.
How can you have pain and not suffer?
It's like if it was, I mean, the best analogy that I have, I think, is when you might like like when you were on the playground as a kid and you saw someone fall off the monkey bars and they skinned their knee and you knew it hurt because you've done that yourself, but you knew at this moment that that pain was theirs, not yours. You might feel compassionate towards them or go, "Ooh, I hope you're okay." But you're not actually feeling their pain. It's like that.
Yeah, but
I could
yeah,
recognize
but yeah,
pain for what it is,
but okay.
but if that body isn't me, then I don't have to associate myself to it. And so, it um I could tell other stories. I I'm aware of, well, I mean, first of all, later in my own life, some of the more dramatic things that were coming to me in the years after that NDE. There was another occasion in which I met a moment that was unbelievably painful.
Okay, but to
And
finish this though, the NDE, did your pain then come back? You went to the hospital, this was over, what? How'd that end?
yeah, how'd that end? I spent the entire day in a state of basically bliss. I prefer to think of it as just extraordinary peace. I also went to sleep that night and slept well for the first time. I would wake up during the night and I would check in repeatedly, like, am I still dying? Yes, I can. The body is shutting down even faster. I can feel it slowing down. Feel the body literally physically slowing down. I'm heading towards a threshold that is clearly has if I go all the way across that threshold, I'm not coming back. But I'm still approaching the threshold at the moment.
You
And
feel you controlled it, whether you died or
I
not?
didn't control it exactly. I mean, I wasn't controlling the process of my body shutting down precisely. What was immensely clear the following day was that it did present as a choice, which I was really surprised by. In the following day, as I got closer and closer to that sort of final threshold. And it really did visually present as a threshold in my mind's eye, in fact. And there was this thought arose that really surprised me, which was you have a choice as to whether you're going to go through that doorway or not. And I thought in that at that that afternoon, I thought, but why wouldn't you go through the doorway? This is the most extraordinary. This is literally the peace that passes all understanding. Why wouldn't one go towards that? It's a good question. I still think it's an interesting question.
You feel
And
someone other than you was asking you that?
uh, it was like that. It was as though it was a dialogue between me and I don't know what, my favorite word for it is Holy Spirit. That's the one that I use inside my own mind. Or I sometimes think of it as a dialogue with the divine. I don't have a better word for it. I could use any word I want. I could
And
call
for
it
the
my
audience,
guide.
no, you're not a Christian. You call yourself agnostic. So who is the
Essentially,
Holy
I mean, I
Spirit?
grew up in a very nominally
You
Christian
know
way
me.
that I wasn't really paying any attention to, but I never identified overtly as a particularly Christian person. No, um, but this was there was a sense of dialogue in it, and um, and to my surprise, as I approached that threshold, the thought arose that I was going to choose not to go through it. And I thought, but why? Why would I make that choice? And the answer given was, well, you have a bunch of things to do here first, which I argued back with by
You
saying,
there?
what?
Who's
I
talking to you?
what do you, wait, I'll get there. I don't, what do you mean I have things to do here? I'm 29 years old. I'm doing my best, but I don't really have a clue what the heck I'm doing. Really, if I'm honest with the world, I've been trying to figure it out for a decade now, and I'm really kind of floundering around. I don't have a great sense of purpose. I have not embarked on some grand career. Uh, and listen, okay, I guess I have some things to do here, but I don't even know what they are. I really don't have any idea what that would mean. What am I doing? What am I doing here? But that feeling and that directive was just surprisingly clear and strong. And I just found myself going, well, I guess I'm not going to go through the doorway then. And I don't know what it is that I don't know what the heck I'm supposed to be doing here. I guess I'm going to have to figure it out.
Did you?
And
Did you
uh,
as of today?
yeah, yes, yeah, I think so. Um, for
Do
the
you
most
think
part,
something new?
it's still a work in progress, but yes,
Do
for the
you
most
think
part.
something new at that moment, what your purpose was, and it's taking you this long to know it?
I think it's been something that's revealed itself over time, and it's been a long time now. It's been a constantly iterative process that has to do with one of my favorite subjects, which is why I brought it up earlier before we actually started recording, which is that matter of listening to inner guidance. And because one of the ways I could describe my entire journey from long before the NDE, throughout the entire thing, all the way up until this very moment, is that the human journey, the spiritual journey, is one in which we could summarize by saying it's simply a journey in which we listen ever more closely to whatever that inner guidance is and abide it
Whatever
even
the
more and more.
inner guidance is, do you think that inner guidance is a superior being of knowledge, or is it something within us?
It's both.
What part of it is, because you told me before you read the Bible, so you know more about
I did.
Christianity than I do.
Hmm.
So, the part where it says, no one comes to the Father but through me. Do you think maybe that some have this type of experience that doesn't fully show everything there is to see, that maybe we're blocked and now we got to search? I don't know. What do you think? Am I going anywhere here? Am I just out here in the middle of nowhere land?
Well, I hesitate to try to parse Christian doctrine. I don't think I'm qualified for that. But
I'm not either.
uh, there is in riddled throughout most religions, most major religions, including Christianity. And this is one of those things that could easily be picked apart, argued, and all, academically toyed with in many, many ways, which I'm not really interested in doing. But there is a persistent notion that there is something all-encompassing about the divine, but there's also some way in which that all-encompassing divinity also resides within us. And we are asked repeatedly in almost every religious tradition to turn inwardly and to look for it and to find it and to listen. And so, you know, uh, to ask a question like, well, is it out there or is it in here? Is um, is a fascinating question, first of all. It's worth asking. And the way I think of that sort of thing is that what ends up happening as we go down this road is we begin discovering that there isn't a difference between those two things. They sound like very opposite dualities, out there, in here. But as we move through this spiritual journey, those opposites begin to collapse into something that seems much more whole. And one of the ways that that shows up is that distinction between outer and inner begins to seem like not that big of a difference. In fact, it seems like it isn't a difference at all. In fact, it seems like really the same thing. And so the idea that the divinity that is out there is also in here simultaneously stops seeming like a contradiction in the first place. And what that does ultimately is simply render the question, is it out there or in here, uh, just sort of moot. Like the question itself begins to just dissolve and drop away because and what a blessing. Can you imagine a divinity so graceful that no matter where you look, whether it is out there or in here, a divinity so graceful that no matter where you look, you still find it? What a beautiful, lovely,
I don't know. I
loving
just think
state of
of all
affairs.
this quantum science stuff they've been talking about and kind of suggesting that there's this field of knowledge, the mathematics is in science, the
Hmm.
mathematics DNA, the mathematics of, everything
Hmm.
that is so intelligently design, how they say
Hmm.
if one little thing was off, that wouldn't nothing would exist and all these things.
Hmm.
And then they get talking about these quantum computers, which is over my head. But like we don't even know
Hmm.
how they work. There's some kind of field of knowledge. I'm like, is this what us NDErs been talking about? That we experienced? That there this knowledge?
Hmm.
Whatever. I was talking to somebody a while back on a show like this, and we get discussing things like this, and I don't know. It just seems like it come to me. I go by many names because we're kind of
Hmm.
discussing, I don't like when people say the source or some people say God, some people say Jesus about their NDEs.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we're talking about discussing
Yeah.
something like that, and all of a sudden it's come to me. I go by many names. And it
Yes.
felt like that was coming from another source than I.
Amen. Good.
And so when we talk about being in this realm, this space that we're discussing, which
Hmm.
you and I have been there. We know what
Hmm.
this place is. It's different than here. It's outside of our body and this existence. And we have this alone time with ourselves. And then what goes on from there? Do we dissipate? Do only some people dissipate? Do some people see their relatives and they go on? We don't
Hmm.
know. We were never dead long enough to give a full, complete, it's like going on vacation for 5 minutes and not 5 days. Let me tell you what happened, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I
Isn't
can,
it important though? Like everything going on today.
well, I think given everything that's going on today, that finding any way in which we can connect to something that is rich and deep and peaceful and connected to spirit in some way, connected to that guidance and connected to the peace that it points towards,
And there's something
is
about you that
I don't know
people,
that there's a better way
but
through
I
than
mean,
that.
people are inviting you to speak. You have been
Yes.
speaking, you have been called for.
Yeah.
And there, and we was talking there earlier, these are not Christian churches. It's like this spiritualist, you give me different names, Universal Church and these things, Center for Spiritual, I wrote something down.
Yeah. I've
Living or
spoken
whatever.
to in churches and in Buddhist monasteries, and soon at the IANS conference, I'm going to be on a panel with a couple of Buddhist monks, and
But not Christian churches. Is that
um,
correct?
Uh, it depends on, everyone has a different definition of that. There's something like 40,000 different sects of Christianity, and they all call themselves Christian, but some of them don't call each other Christian. So
But I mean, let's call it what it is, that there is a specific need for your
I've certainly sat in front of a
skill
lot
set.
of people in that
You're
way in a lot of
speaking,
different
what you're
venues.
bringing from your NDE that is reaching people that that's what's cool about NDEs is you can go with your NDE and you're accepted all over in here, but not over in here. Like I'm thinking of Dean Braxton. He
That's
goes
fine.
all to the churches and it's a
Mm,
ministry and it's bringing people to God and they're praying, they're healing. And
good,
there's that, right? Like there's
good.
NDEs that are doing this, there's NDEs that's doing this. And isn't that interesting that
Yeah,
what we experience, we come back with we find our purpose for our experience.
absolutely. And there is such a wide array of experiences in the NDE world, but we could say that about any kind of transformative spiritual experience. There is such a, NDE is, sort of one branch of the transformative spiritual experience tree. And there's a, you know, the history of humanity is riddled with spiritual experiences that span the globe and span cultures and span the entire length and breadth of human history so far as we can tell. And
I've
there's a
been
great deal of
interviewed,
variety.
I've been interviewed before, and people say, "What have you learned most?" You do, interview almost 500 people, like, and I was like, "There's the experience, and then there is what they make of their experience afterwards."
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I often help people with when they come to me one on one or in these groups and things. But from my point of view, the one of the ways of understanding the vast variety of experiences, and it is vast, is that I think of it in terms of the difference between form and content. And I'm borrowing that phrase from another source, but the form that something takes is highly individualistic. Like if you've come from a very particular background with a very particular kind of mindset, and let's say you have a transformative spiritual experience, whether it's an NDE or something else, chances are very, very good that the form that experience is going to take is in some way that you can understand, that you can find accessible, that you can find understandable. And so it's going to be a form in which it's literally speaking to you in your own language. And if that is and that can take so many forms. But the underlying content is probably going to have some things in common with a vast array of other spiritual things as well. Like it's probably going to point in some way towards peace. It's probably going to bend in some way towards something loving. And again, I realize I'm opening a whole can of worms here, and the array of experiences is vast, but for some people to understand something more about love, the best way it could possibly be shown to them is with a tunnel of light and seeing their dead relatives that they miss. That's one of the number one ways that some aspect of love can be communicated to them because that's the form in which they understand it.
It seems like these experiences are not designed individually for us.
Hmm?
it seems
that
like
they
these experiences are designed by someone
mm, mm,
individually for us that knows us through and through, that
mm.
you don't want a certain experience. Maybe I
We
don't want a
don't need
certain
it.
experience.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense in this other form. So it takes a
It's like
different
speaking
form.
your language. They're not going to
It
speak
is.
Chinese to me,
Of course not.
They're
Yeah.
going to, it's going to speak to me and
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
need to, even what I need to go on in the future. They know
In
whoever they is. If
yeah.
we, right?
Yeah. And if if you
Obviously there's a they, right? Obviously there's a they and some intelligence. Maybe you
uh
don't think so. I don't know.
no, I essentially do think so. I mean I even though I don't particularly identify as Christian in the traditional sense, I love the word God. I love it. I chew on it all the time because I don't have a better word. I can't come up with a better word in English for the intelligence that you're referring to. And I rarely use the word out loud because it's incredibly loaded and has an enormous variety of meanings to people in ways that are it's wildly
You
diverse.
know
But
that it would turn some people off. Is that correct?
sure it would. Yeah, sure it would. Which is not really my concern, but it's something that in the spirit of speaking in a language that someone else can hear, I am often very mindful of it. I mean, it's not hard to find even uh, a biblical underpinning for that. I mean, there is the matter of you don't cast pearls before swine. That's directly from the Bible. What does that mean? Of course, you don't give pearls to pigs. It would be meaningless to them. They would be utterly meaningless to them. It's not a judgment on whether pigs are worthy. It's that it would be absurd, ridiculous, and foolish to offer something that is utterly meaningless to someone else.
That's like if people are coming to my house and I'm going to make them dinner. I'm not going to make this Oriental person, I don't know, something that they would not understand what it is, or vice versa. I'm not going to fix
Yeah,
some farmer come over. I'm
whatever.
not going to fix him some big fancy
Yeah,
dish, right? Like what in the
yeah.
world? It's like unique for that
If you're
person's
going
taste.
to, yeah, if you're going to do something for someone else, um, it only makes sense to do it in a form in which they can accept
It
or
makes
which
me
they can
think of Christmas.
understand.
I mean, if I'm going to pick out a present for you for Christmas, I'm going to put a lot of thought. I got to know him. I got to know
Yeah,
everything about him. I got to know what is that one thing that he
yeah.
needs that he doesn't have. My husband's so good at that. I'm awful at it.
Oh,
I get them what I want them to. I get my musical instruments for my grandchildren. They don't want to play music, but I want them to play
mm,
musical instruments for me. So,
mhm.
but isn't
Yeah.
it's just fast? Like it can get so deep. It really can because we start asking these
Well,
questions of who is this that wants us to
yeah.
think about our purpose and,
It's
and
uh
why do we have a purpose?
oh, that's a good question. I don't know. We're gonna untangle that one from stem to stern here today, um, but these are the things that uh, well, when it comes to working with people, that keeping that top of mind, how can I speak in a language that this person can hear? And not just speak, because so much of the way we move through the world uh, shows the world who we are. Like the way we communicate to the world has just as much to do with all the things we don't say. It has to do with the way we think. There's a phrase that I'm very fond of, and again borrowing from another source, but that no matter who you are, we are all teachers. And it's in the sense that to teach is to demonstrate. And every one of us all the time is demonstrating how we think because that's the way that we move through the world. And sometimes it even informs what comes out of our mouth. But if to teach is to demonstrate, then we're teaching something pretty much every minute in the way that we're moving through the world and demonstrating to others and to ourselves, actually. So teaching does not happen only with words. And speaking, so to speak, uh, speaking in a language that others can hear is sometimes done with words, but frequently not done with words also.
Seems like sometimes the best
uh,
speaking is listening, isn't it?
sometimes it is. Yeah,
That's
sometimes
what I
it is.
said earlier. It's like I
Uh,
have learned that I teach the most when I learn myself, that
mm,
somebody else teach me. When I was early on doing foster care, therapeutic foster was new back in the early 90s, and I had all these foster parents together, and everybody's failing with this kids, but me. And then they come to me, the child psychiatrist in this group says, "What are you doing different? We want to know what you're doing different. You never have any
mhm,
problems with your kids. Everybody's happy at your house. All these other people, they
mm,
can't handle one, and you got all these." I was like, I don't know. So they said, "Well, what do you do when you have a problem with a child?" And I said, "Well, I take them away from everyone. We go up the steps to my bedroom. I shut the door, and we sit on the bed, and I say, 'What's going on?' And I listen. That's all." And that made me
mm.
think, just now as we're talking, what happens at NDE? We're taken away from everyone else. We're taken up somewhere else, and it's quiet and it's introspective, and there's this loving presence. And it's just like, I know people talk about this oneness, but sometimes I
Mhm.
think it's this individualness is where we sometimes learn that one-on-one. Back when I did children's services, we had all these programs, nothing worked for these kids. And then they said, but they started checking and they found one thing did work. And that was the big brothers, big sisters. It was that one-on-one relationship.
Yeah,
And isn't
yeah.
that kind of what we got when we have NDE? We are taken away out of our body, out of this world, and we're into another realm. And we have this one-on-one. We can't see them, we can't
Mhm,
hear them, but we feel it. There's all these different experiences, and we come
mhm,
back individually given. And like you said, well, go earlier, there's these
mhm.
years you went quiet on it. You didn't talk about it.
Yes, yes. I refused to talk about it. There was a couple of reasons for that. One was uh, I knew I didn't at the time. I just didn't have the language for it. And it's funny to look back on that time because I talk about it rather regularly these days. And so to contrast that with now, I'm like, why didn't I have the words then? uh, and that's an interesting question still for me. But one was that I felt that if I spoke to what I knew that I knew and had seen what I'd seen and that sort of thing, that nobody would believe me. I thought I would be a total weirdo, and that didn't, that's a that's an aspect of that judgment, that faculty of judgment we were talking about earlier. And I think I kind of painted myself into a corner with that to some extent.
I think
It also,
we don't have words to speak until we have people to hear.
well, that's, I was about to just say, relating to the thing we were just talking about a second ago, is speaking in a language people can understand. So I don't know that I would have been able to speak about it at the time in a way that would have been accessible. Certainly not to the people around me. I did not, I was not around, family, friends, and otherwise, and
We might as well said
that
that
I
we
think would
Martians
have been
come and
able
took
to
us to their
accept it.
planet, you know. It's received the same way, right?
Yeah. Um, these days I'm perfectly capable of talking about the subject with the same friends and family members that I once formerly felt like that was impossible. But um, and also in some respects, it just needed to marinate. Like I had you know, to to have an experience in which I saw with great clarity that I wasn't my body, and that frankly that body of mine wasn't that important. Like in the end, it wasn't that meaningful to me if the body stayed or not. Like if it dies, fine. There was no issue with that at all. None. Like that was not a matter of fear. There was no fear about that. There was no sense of loss in it whatsoever. uh, because again, it was in favor of this all-encompassing wholeness, which was missing nothing, no sense of loss. And, you know, to have that experience so clearly and so deeply, and then many weeks later, you know, when the recovery has, by the way, eventually, just for the ones who were wondering whatever happened, uh, why was he dying? Like we never even found out. It was for the dumbest reason in all of medical science. My body was shutting down because of dehydration. And so eventually there came a point where my father looked carefully into my eyes and said, I think something's not right. And we're going to go back over to the hospital, Jonah. And he took me, you know, it's a 2.5 hour drive, and they admit me, they confirm I'm dying and that it's the easiest fix on the planet as well. So they poke me with an IV bag full of saline solution, put a bunch of liquid into my body, and I'm
That's the first
immediately
thing they
beginning.
do, right? That must cure a
Yeah,
lot of people. It's the first thing they do.
it was the only thing they needed to do in my case. And so I was putting my feet back on the ground pretty quickly. And it sped up my physical recovery. It's, you know, I won't labor over the details, but 3 weeks after that point, I had healed up enough and had put my feet back on the ground firmly enough to go back to my job, to go back to work. And so as I'm driving to the office a little bit late, probably eating a breakfast burrito in my car, sitting in traffic, and, you know, in a hurry, like, "Oh, I gotta do the things. I gotta do all the things. There's so
Yeah.
many things." As a otherwise functioning grown up, and I could not square that feeling like all of a sudden this body seemed like extremely important. And it just seemed so different and so far apart from that experience that I knew and had experienced what I'd experienced in the NDE. It also seemed very far divorced from the extraordinary peace that 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 had, you know, that I'd experienced. And I simply couldn't figure out how to square them. I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's this, but then there's this, and I one of these seems chaotic, kind of messy, and ooh, hard, frankly. And the other seemed extraordinary, beatific, peace beyond all understanding. And I just can't quite figure out how to square that or to bridge that gap. How, and it was such a cognitive dissonance that my response to it was to bury it and decide not to talk about it. But I couldn't forget it. And what took place over the next decade then was being life circumstances brought to me a whole range of other circumstances and experiences, some of them having to do with death and dying of other friends and family members, including my father, and eventually in which I actually had to be tasked with uh, the job to uh, let the doctors know when to unplug the machines to let him die, and that fell to me. And those kinds of experiences, along with a whole range of other uh, experiences that we would call awakening experiences or spiritually transformative experiences were coming my way that forced me back in touch with the NDE experience and forced me to reconcile with all these things and forced me to essentially deal with them, confront them, ask the deep questions. And that's what eventually led to a real awakening, a real turning point in which essentially that piece felt as though it settled in permanently. It doesn't mean that there isn't an sort of up and down character to my otherwise ordinary human life. There still is, but there's a way in which that overarching oneness and that underlying peace is still recognized in a way that seems permanent. And it's really that I end up sharing with people, whether I'm in front of a Christian church or whether I'm in front of a Buddhist group or whether I'm in front of some other gathering or whether I'm one-on-one with someone. It's exactly what I'm going to be sharing with the 12 people that come on the retreat in October. We're walking the Camino. We are literally going to turn this life's journey into actual journey. It's a 7-day walk on this ancient pilgrimage route
Where
across
is that?
southern Spain. It's this famous pilgrimage route called the Camino. The full name. It's known as El Camino de Santiago, which is the Way of Saint James, and it's a 1,000-year-old medieval pilgrimage route that is, you know, hundreds of thousands of people do it these days. There are many different routes. We're going to be doing one called the Portuguese route. It's actually going to go from about the Portuguese-Spanish border to the cathedral town of Santiago, which is St. James.
Was the,
And
was there a moment or a gradual process, which was it that you went from not talking about this to where you're at now, where you go around speaking?
yeah, it wasn't really that gradual. I was dead silent for years, many, many, many years, went through some the most powerful awakening experiences that actually made me even more quiet. I actually spent an entire year hardly talking at all, which is an odd way to be a grown-up. But it's also why I actually completely left my regular life. Having gone through those awakening experiences, I shut down my business, I sold my car, I got rid of
What was your business? I'm
my
curious.
home.
What
Oh,
was,
I at the time not that important. I was running a small import company with a business partner. I did
okay.
that for 9 years, and I walked away from that. I gave the keys to my home to someone I barely knew, and I walked away from the woman I was in a relationship with, who was profoundly understanding of it at the time. And
Why
and
did you
I
do all that?
because the drive to really reconcile these inner questions, to reconcile what I knew that I knew with the chaos and busyness of ordinary life, in which things like this body actually seem important. What got it internally, that had become a a question of such ferocity that I just couldn't ignore it, and to the point that I wanted to focus on it so completely at the exclusion of everything else. Like, it sounds over dramatic to me these days, but at the time, it had gotten to this ferocity of, I will figure this out and I will understand this, or I will die trying, and I will put my life on the line for it. I will walk away from my career. I will walk away from this entire life. Maybe I'll end up living under a freeway overpass. I don't know, but I will put every single bit of it on the line to pursue this understanding.
I did that too when I started my channel.
Mm,
I was sitting at a construction job. It was pouring down the rain. Bunch of guys huddled on a porch. It was still dark, 3 in the morning, get ready to go orientation. And I sat there and I kept thinking, all I want to do is start a YouTube channel on NDEs. I don't know how to do it. I don't know nothing about Zoom. I didn't know about YouTube. And I
hmm
just sat there, thought about it for about an hour. And they were late opening up the thing, or maybe I would have already went in. I don't know. But
hmm
I just walked away, walked to the parking lot and got
Yeah,
in my car and drove home, went straight to the computer, got my wet
there you
clothes,
go.
straight to the computer. By the end of that day, I had a nonprofit business called NDE TV with the Ohio Secretary of
hmm
State. I had got my YouTube up and I didn't know how to do any of it.
hmm
But by damn, I learned.
hmm
And I knew how much money I was walking away from that job.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
figured it'll probably take me the rest of the year to make
yeah,
up for what I lost this week. I didn't think people
yeah,
made money at YouTube. I really didn't know. I thought of it,
yeah.
it said something like you got to work so long and then whatever.
hmm
And I, like you, hell or high water, I'm doing this.
Yeah, I didn't know where I was going either at all. And I have to say, Peggy, that sounds like an exquisitely beautiful example of a moment in which you followed that inner guidance. I would certainly say the same in my own case. In my case, it wasn't to go build something, it was literally to dismantle everything. I never returned to my old life.
I never went back to that work either. My husband was still
Um,
working there and I said, I ain't going back.
yeah.
And he ended up getting, his health problems, so he wasn't doing it either.
Mhm.
And actually ended up my indie channel did real well. It actually paid for like our first year off where he started, getting his retired with Social Security where he was, so it all worked out.
Congratulations.
So
Congratulations.
But
Yeah.
then I put up the brakes. I'm not doing, when I got to my peak, I'm like, I don't know about this anymore. I'm
Hmm.
gonna slow down. I'm gonna think about it
Yeah.
because there's a
Good.
lot to it,
Things change.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
different things coming
You
out on
have.
this that I don't know which direction to go. So,
Well, I imagine as you listen to that inner guidance ever more and ever more clearly, you'll find your way.
yeah.
You'll find your way.
So
The
how was that? What was the people like around you that knew you and now you're out here speaking on this topic? And was it a,
Yeah, well, yeah, that juncture in which I basically left everything, I set myself on a multi-month solo retreat and eventually returned from that 4 months later and knew that life really never did return. It was to what it had been before, and that kicked into motion another multi-year period of settling into that kind of awakening, because it was during that period of being away that the uh, for me the most pivotal experiences came my way. And uh, it was also a period in which there began to be, well, first the first thing I did again was almost nothing. Like those shifts internally came, and there just was a long period of time in which I think I just had to sit quietly with it, which is
yeah.
why I literally barely spoke for over a year. And I did eventually come back to my hometown. I was there for a little while, and there was this sort of feeling like, well, but what am I even doing here anymore? None of the old constructs make any sense. And I just left. And I literally wandered the globe with a backpack for almost 2 years
Oh,
and hardly said anything to anyone. But there were some instances during that period of time where occasionally people would seek me out and sort of put me, they would start to ask questions, or they would, I was sort of being put in the position of being a bit of a teacher, that in a way that I generally had not sought, or and usually felt deeply, kind of uncomfortable with, to be honest, and often turned down. Actually, I often just turned away and remained quiet.
do you
Actually, I,
suppose we subconsciously crave that aloneness that we
well,
felt?
in my case, it wasn't subconscious at all. It was very overt. I mean, I
Yeah.
just felt like it's what the time demanded. And I also rather, and it was actually a very joyful, very peaceful time for the most part. And I kind of, I think in a way I got kind of stuck in it for a while. Like after a while, it probably had run mo its course for the most part. Like that quietude and silence was needed, and that need began to come to its end. But then I sort of stayed there anyways, and because it had become very comfortable. And the story over the past bunch of years for me now has been like a repeated call to actually speak up, to be of use, to be of service, to it in the ways that I can. And uh, I've had to kind of contend with my own tendency to be like, oh, I don't know, maybe not. But that's it's just changed. Where before I felt really called genuinely to silence, the more I remain in really pure silence these days, the more it seems like I'm headed the wrong direction. Like if I'm going to be here on the planet at all, that the only thing that makes any sense at all is to be of use and of service, and to do so in the ways that have sort of oddly and curiously and come my way to be of use and of service. And
I
that
used to feel
require
that
some
way. Now
speaking
I
up.
kind of feel like y'all on your own.
Yeah.
I've done
Yeah.
my job. Y'all on your own.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a time for that too. Congratulations. Congratulations. I think I'm just embarking on a different phase of the journey, really. And by embarking, I mean it's been that way for the last, 3, 4 years. But subsequent to not the NDE, but there's the NDE, and then there's a bunch of years of these additional experiences and awakenings and things like that. And it's through those additional experiences that like many people in this space have ended up with uh, that opened up in me some intuitive awareness that wasn't quite as prevalent before. It opened up some, sort of healing experiences and healing opportunities that hadn't been open before. And that's very much a product of listening to that inner guidance, listening to that inner prompt. And there came a point where uh, I'd be standing next to someone, could be a complete stranger, could be a dear friend. It didn't seem to matter, but every now and then some form of that inner prompt would crop up and be like, "Hey, you could be really helpful to this person." And especially if it was a stranger, I would think, okay, I mean, that sounds nice and all. I'm generally on board with being, that sounds good as a decent human being. That just seems like a nice way to roll in the world. Okay, be happy to be helpful. But they're a stranger. What am I supposed to do here? We're standing in line for coffee. And and that turned into an actual healing touch modality that I couldn't have fathomed. As a young person growing up, if someone said you're going to put your hand on someone's head, and they're going to end up having a healing experience, and so are you, Jonah. Um, I would have said, not only is that ridiculous, it's absurd. I mean, I would have pushed back against it in a way that was absolute and caustic.
So do you feel like you come back with a gift of that?
Uh, yeah, yes. I mean, it's curiously been it's been part of the journey that has required my own mind to be opened further and further and further, and to relax my own judgment about so many things, because I would have judged that extremely harshly as a young person. And, but when you're faced with something over and over and over, even in a stubborn mind, there at some point there's like, well, okay, I guess like turns out there's more to the story here than I thought. I didn't know everything and I thought I knew. Turns out there's more to the story. And the, I've spoken repeatedly during our time together about this dissolving that sense of individuated self into this overarching wholeness. And it's a tricky subject. It's often a beautifully poetic topic, but it's one that is often particularly hard to put into words in ways that are really useful for people or understandable for people. But because at the core of that experience ultimately is looking inwardly here now and seeing that individuated sense of self isn't really fundamentally true. It's not really as real as as we tend to make it out. And at this stage of the game, you could look in all kinds of other uh, areas of things like neuroscience and uh, all kinds of branches of spirituality, and in quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and find that in all these different disciplines, there's things that point to that exact thing that I just mentioned, that sense of individuated sense of self isn't really true. So these days, it's not actually a completely unique point of view. It isn't at all. And I'm thrilled that that is the case these days. Um, but it is absolutely at the core of that overarching sense of peace. Because if that sense of self just isn't true, then all the stories and the baggage that attach to it, including all the traumas and the pains and the sufferings, just aren't as big a deal. It is it is precisely why Saint Francis of Assisi said, "Ah, we wear the ego as a light garment. We can take it lightly. We don't have to take it so heavily.
But we're
All the
placed in, for whatever
all
reasons, we're placed
yeah,
in these bodies that
yeah,
makes us all individual.
yeah, but we don't
And
have to
then,
take it too seriously.
right, but then when you're out of it, you know, like,
Yeah,
little kids, me, I had it first, it's mine, all this,
yeah,
why do they
that's
have
very
more than
natural.
me? And all this comparison, competition, and the Democrats versus Republicans. Oh my God, right?
Yes, it takes
All
all
this,
forms, grown up and
yeah.
child.
And then you have this where you enter this realm. We all die and we enter this
Mm.
realm that we don't know what happens completely, but we know we've all touched our toe, the end ears over there, to know that we do exist outside these bodies. We're no longer with our family. They can't hear us talk. And we can't communicate. We don't have access to our bank account and our house and our car. We're completely
Yeah,
plucked out.
just fine, fine.
And some are fine. Like I was fine at 5 years old. Okay.
Mm,
But at 25, no, I had kids to raise.
mm,
But so it's very strange, as you know, being an indie ear and having just a little bit of toe out there in the
mm.
outside the body, and to have experienced something else and then what we make
Well,
of it.
yeah, I think to put a little bit of a cap on it for today in a way, and to borrow a lovely old cliche phrase that I love so, so much. And it's that truth is what sets us free. To me, everything I've spoken about today is uh, points towards some kind of truth with a capital T. Um, and I felt like in the NDE and the subsequent experiences and awakening experiences that I was put face to face with aspects of truth about the deepest truth about who and what I am. And that that was truth that allowed me in various circumstances, times, and places to be free of some of the worst suffering imaginable, and to wear the ego as a light garment, and to wear this life as a light garment, and to be a bit more free of some of the suffering of it. It doesn't mean that there haven't been challenges. There certainly have been. I've alluded to some of them.
How do you think us being
And
on
that's
the other side translates when we come back to having these gifts? What do you think
sure.
is happening?
Yeah, I can tell you exactly in my own experience that to have a healing encounter with someone, like even to it still sounds funny to me to this day that I would be prompted to sit quietly with someone for a moment, put my hand on their head, and in that moment, to me, it is not at all an act of conferring something here onto them. It is not that at all. It kind of looks like it from the outside, but that's not how it's experienced at all. It's a joining together. It's an act of joining together in this funny form. And in that moment, I'm going to go inwardly to that stillness, that quietude in which there is no sense of an individuated sense of self. And because there's no sense of self in there, it's it's like connecting to, if there's no sense of self to be separate, then there's nothing separate. It's like dipping into that overarching wholeness and doing it in connection with this other person. And if there's no sense of separation and it's all whole and it's all one, which is exactly how it is experienced, um, and I'm talking about my own experience in it. It's all very automatic. It's become very natural because that's just, to me, that's literally the truth of it with a capital T. And in that sense of wholeness, there's nothing broken. So there's no sense in me that there's even something that needs to be fixed. How could there be? And what seems to happen in those instances is that some aspect of that experience arises in this other person in some way that makes sense to them, that speaks to them, that is accessible to them and understandable to them. And that can take a vast array of forms. Sometimes it takes the form of some kind of physical healing for them. Sometimes it takes the form of inner recognition. Sometimes people have vivid inner experiences. The most common experience people report is simply tapping into a kind of peace that is frequently unusual for them, in which they feel a little touch of that peace that passes understanding. And that alone is something that is beatific and has a healing quality to it.
So I
Um,
suppose without you having a religious aspect on yours, I don't know what word to use, so I'm going to throw out the word quantum. So
sure.
if you entered a quantum field, say if we all enter this quantum field, okay, some people say heaven and they say this, and they say God, Jesus, whatever, Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
So we'll just go with the neutral word, quantum field. Say if we enter this quantum field in our NDEs, where this person saw that, experienced that, whatever, doesn't matter what they experience, but when they come back, when a lot of us have these gifts, and if we're going
Mhm.
to use the word quantum, and so maybe like yours is touching someone, and maybe this quantum field,
Mhm.
somebody would say the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, that's a phrase I'm very fond of.
Um, it just, this is my thing. It just seems to me like, I know this sounds like a lot of strangeness to some people, but it's under in the ears, get it? And it just seems like, how can we understand this better? How can we, in a science, is it not able to be studied in a science form and not able to be studied in a spiritual religious form? What form can we use to study these experiences? Any clue?
Yeah, it's both. There are aspects of science that can, in fact, study these things. Many aspects of science are studying these things, but there are aspects of it that science cannot possibly touch. Also, that they
And it's
and never will touch.
and it
And
seems like not
and
no
they're
matter
and they're
which.
the
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
the ones that science can't touch are the easiest to demonstrate. And let me quickly explain what I mean. Peggy, if you were to think of someone in your life that is past, they're no longer with us, but that you loved very much, you got that person in mind?
My
Could be even
twin.
a pet.
My
Okay,
twin.
great, great. Um, they there is no way whatsoever for science to measure the love that's in your heart regarding them. None. And there never will be. But would you deny to me that that love that you feel is not one of the most real things in all of your experience?
It's with me
Uh,
every day. You know what I mean?
every day, every day, every day. And over the course of time, that love for them has not waned one molecule, has it?
Mm-mm.
No. Time has made no difference to it in any way whatsoever. Yeah.
40
And
years.
they aren't here, and yet your love for them has it may have even grown, but it certainly has not lessened.
And never set eyes on them. Only 2 months pregnant.
Yeah. So let's be very clear that one of the most powerful things in your life, one of the most real things in your life, has sat outside the limitations of time. It is outside the bounds of time. They are not here, and yet they are so present for you. Which is another way of saying they have been with you in a way that is beyond the limitations of space, even.
And I'm thinking, I was coming home in the car one day. My ex was driving these twins' father, and all of a sudden I started crying for the first time. And he looks at me, he's like, "What's the matter with you?" And I'm like, "This was my due date.
Mm,
He said, we ain't gonna get over that shit,
mm,
right?
mhm,
So some people, the same, they were as much of my children as his, you know.
mhm.
For me, the love, right? And him is like, what's your problem? And so many people don't feel that for their children or their miscarriages, their unborn or whatever. They just don't feel that. And there's a lot of people, the big debate, abortion today, that they can't understand why you could possibly care about those clumps of cells. Why
Yeah.
but like you
I
said,
don't,
there's a love for
yeah.
some, and there is not for the same
Well,
for others. So,
my only point at the moment was to
right. I went totally
point
off your
out,
topic.
yeah, we need not, I don't think we're going to unpack the politics of what you just said there today, but um, the the point of me bringing it up was that what you experience in that love is something that is beyond the limitations of time and beyond the limitations of space, and
And
that you experience that all the time.
people that mourn
And
death have got, eventually get to someone's death, have we eventually get to a point where you can't take this from me. Do not take my pain. Do not try to make me feel better. This is all I have left of them. You don't
well,
have any more memories. You don't have the hopes and dreams you had for this life with this person. You just have this sitting on your heart at all times. And do not take that because this is them.
mm,
That pain is them.
well,
So, and people that
my
don't feel love will never know that. They will not know that joy, nor will they know that pain.
any time that any of us in any way feel some kind of lovingness, whether it's coming to us or from us, anytime we're experiencing something loving, we're essentially experiencing something that is outside the boundaries of time and outside the boundaries of space. And that is why science is never going to fully be able to
They can't
measure it
put it
and
in a
test
test
it.
tube. They can't put love in a test tube and measure it.
You can't. You
But we're not
can't.
going to
And
solve nothing, are we?
that's
We want
that's
answers,
fine.
though.
Science can do other things that may be very helpful, but it's never going to be able to do that. And it's also, a lot of people have come to me saying, "Oh, I wish I had an NDE," or "I wish I had some mind-bending non-dual experience like you have." And part of the reason for me bringing this up in this way is that those experiences like NDEs and transformative spiritual experiences often, very often, happen in ways that seem to happen outside the boundaries of space and time. They seem to happen in some other dimensional way outside those boundaries. And what I'm pointing out is that every single one of us has experienced something loving, and therefore every single one of us has experienced something of that very nature outside the bounds of time and space. And so do not think for a second that any of us are exempt from the possibility of that kind of experience. You've already had it a million times, probably daily in some form. And that is good news.
Yep.
It means you are just as connected to divinity and to spirit as anyone else.
Good place to leave. Positive thoughts.
Amen. And
Okay.
if anyone wants to come kick this around with me more, I invite them to do it. You can find me at my website. It's called assistthespirit.com.
I'll put a link in the description.
That's
Okay.
very sweet of you.
Thank
And
you,
if you
Jenna.
want to come on the retreat later, look me up for the retreat. It's in late October.
I'll put you have a website that has that information, correct?
It's, yep,
Okay.
assistthespirit.com. It's all there.
Okay, I'll put that
Yeah.
on. All right. All right.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Peggy.
Uh, bye.